We're going to look at understanding what the pitch deck is and what the key components of it are. What are the things you absolutely must include in there? We'll have a few nice to haves as well. We'll look at communicating your passion because you are not just doing this because it's a great idea. You have it because you believe in it. And we'll look at some of the tools of building a pitch deck. And I'm going to add a little extra bit on here and show you a few different pitch decks that I've worked on recently that were actually successful at achieving a level of funding. So I think that might be a really good insight into a real world of how pitch decks look that actually work. So, what is the pitch deck exactly? It's a concise presentation that outlines your business idea, but it does more than just outline it. It showcases that business idea. By saying showcasing, we're saying this is a very positive presentation of what you're trying to present to people. We use it to communicate the vision of what you're trying to achieve. And usually it's used to attract investment. Now, sometimes it might be used to attract some kind of funding through government programs, like the Business Innovation Program with the Northern Territory government, or the relevant business innovation kind of programs that occur in many other states and territories across Australia. But it is pretty concise and not going into a lot of detail here. There's always time in a pitch to ask lots of questions later on. So you don't need to have pages and pages and pages full of words and tables and spreadsheets. All that information can be provided separately as well. So you don't necessarily need to start off with that in your pitch deck. What it does, it simplifies all the important information you've got about your idea and how you're planning to make that into a business that makes it really easy to understand. I think some people get lost in the detail of the technology or the detail of the innovation rather than explaining the detail of the business that you're trying to create there. Usually what you would do is go into any one of these pitch meetings with a fairly good idea about what the business is you're trying to create, not just the technology or the innovation you're trying to create. Secondly, we'll look at using visuals to enhance the clarity and retention, because there's one thing about shaking hands and drawing on the back of a napkin, but there's another thing actually having something clearly presented on a board in front of you that you very easily can picture. It's all about clarity, and that's probably the key principle of a pitch deck, is to make sure the information you're putting together is very, very clear. There's not a lot of room for interpretation there. It's abundantly clear. And we want it to be memorable. We want people to be able to see that information and retain it for use later. When they go back to committee meetings and investment committees and boards, they can very accurately take that information, not just having, a bunch of paperwork that they can present to decision makers, but they almost have a belief in it themselves that they are advocating on your behalf to get that investment. It also structures some information that could be seen as very dry and very boring in a very logical but very easily digestible format. So bite size. We're thinking bite sized chunks here, not great big swaths of information. I've unfortunately had to work through some pitch decks that had so much depth of information in them because the people who were presenting it were very technical in nature, and they felt like the technical information was utterly necessary in there for anyone to understand what the value of their product was. The opposite was actually true, is that the technical side, you will be assessed by technical people down the track. But the ability to sell that vision, what is so great about this idea isn't the technical background, it's who your customer is. And we'll look at some of those pieces soon. We'll also look at emphasizing the core value proposition of what it is you're trying to do. What is the absolute core of what makes your thing different? What makes it, of interest to a customer? What makes it of interest to an investor who would say, yes, this is why we're investing in this? Is it a financial return? Is it a technology? Is it the intellectual property that is tied up in your innovation that is really, really attractive? So a well-crafted pitch deck is something that's very good for you to take into the world with you simply because you've got a ready-made brochure of sorts about what your idea is. But probably the greatest thing it does, it breaks down all the tech talk, it breaks down all the jargon, it breaks down all the passion you would have to it into bite-sized chunks that are very easy for people to understand from all kinds of backgrounds. That might be an investor, it may be someone who you are trying to attract to your business as an employee, or it could simply be family and friends who are just there to say, what is it you do? And you can bring out your pitch deck and say, this is what it's all about. So if it's geared too much towards any one particular group, it may not be appropriate to others. So you want to have a pitch deck, which is not just one, you may have three. You may have one for explaining to customers, one explaining to investors, one that's explaining to family and friends, and you might even have another one that's to go to very specific kinds of people. It's always about ensuring their understanding. So that greater clarity is far more important than technical detail, because technical detail can be assessed and looked into later. The assumption is the technical stuff, it works, and it has value. So what we're more interested in is, what is the value that all that technical stuff you're talking about, what value does it have to someone? Does it solve a problem? We want a really good pitch deck because it engages people to want to ask questions. If you come out of a pitch meeting and no one asks any questions, it doesn't mean you were clear. It means that there's nothing in there they connected to and nothing in there that was of interest to them. So you want that engagement. You want tons of questions. You want clarification to be asked for. It also makes you a bit more credible. If you can put together a damn good pitch deck, it makes you look like someone who knows what they're doing. You are investment ready. You are actively looking for investment. You haven't just slapped together something as a year 12 student cramming before their HSC exams. And it shows you're professional, shows that you've actually taken the time and the effort to be putting this into place. And it helps you be more persuasive. You may not be the most persuasive, charismatic person in the world, but if your pitch deck, if your presentation is in such a way that it's really easy for people to understand, that takes a lot of pressure off you and allows your natural personality to come through. If you are technical in nature, if you are a technician or an engineer, then it allows you to go into more depth if asked for. But basically, if you just follow what's on your deck and follow almost like, discussion notes, then it gives you somewhere to go. You're more persuasive if you're confident, and confident comes from having a really good set of notes you can refer into. Now, the components of a pitch deck vary from company to company and situation to situation, but they all kind of have something in common. So the first one would be that there'd be some kind of statement about what your problem is. It clearly defines what the problem is you're trying to solve and who it's for. So who is your target audience? Are they people who are trying to catch taxis but hate the taxi experience because they never know whether it's going to turn up or if it's going to turn up? Then Uber would say, well, we've got an app that shows you when the taxi's arriving, who the taxi driver is, and what kind of car it's going to be. So you always know what you're going to get. That's an example of a great problem statement saying people don't like the uncertainty and the insecurity of getting into a taxi. Great. Here's an answer to that. You can also look at emphasizing the urgency or the importance of addressing these problems to attract the interest. What that really means in less words is, how urgent is this problem to solve? How much does it hurt the customer or the person who is experiencing that problem? Is it enough for them to want to consider another way to do it? When it came to taxis, yes, Uber was the perfect example of that. It did hurt enough. People hated the taxi experience so much that they would go to an alternative arrangement. And it didn't matter if that was something new, something old, something they didn't know, something completely unfamiliar. They went with it anyway because simply it hurt enough. It was urgent enough for them to want to solve. Next up, the target customer. Who are those people? Who are they? We need demographics. We want to know their behaviors. What are their needs? So if you look at something like Airbnb, we go, demographics could be groups of people for whom staying in individual hotel rooms is way too expensive and way too disconnected. They want a communal experience in one house that can hold up to 10 people. So we go, who are those kind of people? What are their needs? They want to be able to cook their own food. They want to be able to relax. They want to be able to swim in a pool. They want to be able to be connected as a small community for that period of time they're traveling. Well, if we know that about them and you know them about them, it makes us go, well, you know who you're aiming for. Having a solution without a person who has a problem that needs solving is kind of like, having a date, but not having anyone to go on that date with. It's not a smart way to operate. It also explains how addressing these needs creates a viable market opportunity. You connect a problem with a customer who's having that problem, and you can show us who that is. Then that shows us there is an opportunity. There's a market for your product or your service. And that's a thoroughly compelling conversation to have with someone when you really know who that customer is. You know who they are. You've met them, you've talked with them, and you're able to articulate who that is. Next is a bit of an analysis of the opportunity. This is looking at all the data you've collected, and we call this the data room. So in your data room, what have you got for us to show us about the size of that market? Is it just 5 people? Is it 5 million people? Are they in Australia or are they global? is there growth in that section? So are you expecting that if you were able to answer this problem with your problem with your solution, will that be it? Do they just pay for that once and then they go away, or is there some kind of revenue growth that can be factored in? Is it a subscription service? And this is where you say, this is why we'll choose this particular kind of business structure, and this proposal for how we're going to get our revenue out is based upon this data. We know there's 1 million people who have this problem. We know that 1 million people will become 2.5 million in the next 10 years. So the potential revenue is quite exponential. You want to look at what the competitive landscape, who's already doing something like this? Are they doing it well? Have you done a SWOT analysis on them, whether they're doing it well, or do they only address part of the problem and not the full problem where you may go a little bit further? Or have you found a problem within the problem that you're actually going for, that one little niche issue that might only have 1,000 people, but those 1,000 people are willing to spend $1 million a year with you? This identifies the opportunities for you to be different from others. So you're not just another version of the same thing, not just Ola, or you're not just Didi, who's just coming in with exactly the same thing as what Uber is and expecting to grow and to be able to be really good at that. Like Ola is pulling out of Australia. Like they have just no differentiation when it comes to the market to Uber. So they're pulling out and they're kind of closing down worldwide. They're not really doing very well at all. Next we go, what is the solution? And by express solution, we mean you're expressing the solution to the problem. So you're describing what your product is or your service is and how it addresses the problem you've identified. So if the problem is people who who do not want to have to spend money on 10 different hotel rooms for 10 different people, and they want to stay in the one place, how does your solution solve that? This is where a big disconnect often happens with founders who just don't know how to connect what their solution is to the problem, because maybe they never actually looked at the problem and got real data from the real world on whether people had that problem. My very first startup I did myself was a collapse it was a glorious, blaze of glory of death and destruction, because I simply didn't ask that first question: is what is the problem you have, and match my solution to that problem. What I went out is designed a solution to a problem that no one had. And so it didn't work. Obviously, it didn't work, didn't grow, had crashed out, and there was $150,000 completely gone. You don't want to have that problem. Trust me, it's not a great place to be. So this is where you go, okay, there's features and I've got innovations and all these wonderful ways of addressing this problem. Um, but it's all part of this cohesive solution that's well researched to be exactly what that customer is looking to solve and how they're looking to solve it within a range of payment. They'll give us money to solve this problem, and this is how much money they'll give to solve it. So this is where you go, this is the solution, and maybe a little bit of this is how much it's going to cost us to solve it, and this is how much it's going to cost the customer to solve that problem. Now you want to look at what your requirements are. What's your ask? So what do you need? Have you got resources in place? Have you got funding already? Have you got partnerships? How much has already been funded? Have you borrowed $50,000 from the bank of mum and dad? Or have you taken on angel investment or something that would indicate, what the situation of your business is right now? If there's been a contentious thing, because if there's been some investment in you before, some would see that as a dilution of what they may be able to get, what their return would be, but others look at it as a very reassuring thing. If you've got investment from someone else before, well, that looks good for us. It takes away some of that risk, because we go, if someone else is risking in it, well, then, that looks a little easier for us. This also helps you to justify that investment opportunity, because it aligns your needs with some kind of outcomes and returns down the track. So if you're going, if I need $1.5 million, but we're only expecting revenue over the next 10 years of about $1.5 million, there's no return on investment. There's no extra. It's just basically enough to cover that loan, but there's nothing else to run the company on. So we go, okay, we'd want to see some kind of growth that matches the kind of investment you're looking for. If we're going to put $1.5 million into it as a complete hypothetical, we want to see a very big return on that, not just $1.5 million, because that's essentially a loan without interest, right? So tell us what you need. Tell us what you're going to use it for. Then add a little bit of you. Now, I put an asterisk on that, add a bit of you, but not crazy you. We want the you that has a very clear purpose for why you're doing this. Passion isn't this crazy thing where you're just going, throwing glitter in the air and go, I love this because it's my dream. It's not Australian Idol. It's not, going into, America's Got Talent and saying, oh, I want to sing because this is my dream. This is beyond that. This is a little bit further. We're looking for some purpose. Because when it comes down to it, if you're working in something you don't really have a passion for, what is going to keep you waking up every morning to go back to it? The money? Because you could be doing a job for that. So we're looking for some kind of greater purpose in what you're doing because that convinces us that you're going to be there again tomorrow, again the day after, again in 3 years, again in 10 years, that the investment that someone's putting in there is safe because you are committed. Commitment isn't just saying, yes, I'm committed, I'm going to make this grow. It's all about you having some bigger purpose for being there. What is your purpose? Explain that to us. And that comes through by, balancing your enthusiasm. Because if you're passionate, you might be super enthusiastic and running around screaming, throwing glitter in the air and telling people how this is the thing you need to solve. This is your purpose in life. You still need to be clear, not just on the passion, but say, you know, why you're passionate about this. What is the big problem you're solving? It may be not just the customer's problem, but is it a global problem that you want to do? And you do that through a bit of storytelling. And that storytelling has to be quite structured, have a very clear beginning, a very clear point in the middle, and a very clear end to it, which, not a happily ever after story, but I'm talking about more of, this is the way the world could be changed because of this. Be excited, but don't be overwhelming. Be detailed in what you are able to provide, but be very simple in the way you provide it, if that makes sense. If there's a lot of data you need to say, you don't have to give all the data. What you do is indicative data. It shows us that customer A is the kind of person who has around about $1.2 million to spend on this kind of tool every year. We will be hoping to take about $250,000 of that customer's money on this particular solution. And we believe that money is available through cost savings we can provide that will make our solution very affordable. And why will we choose us? Because we've got the solution that works. We've tested this in the real world. We've got some enthusiasm behind this. We have traction. We have, a dream of taking this further. Now, the enthusiasm will tell us that you're committed, but the facts will tell us that you know what you're doing. You're not just a crazy person going off like a mad scientist. You're not being young Einstein, Yahoo Serious, running around and confusing people with crazy inventions. So, how do we tell the story of your startup? How do we tell the story of what you're trying to do whilst being persuasive, engaging without being crazy? We'll do that by using some anecdotes to illustrate your journey. So you can start off with, this is where we came from. This doesn't always have to be part of a pitch deck. It can be, almost the opening scene, if you like. You bring up and say, here's a picture of the two founders. We first met when we were 7 years old, and we started up a lemonade stand out the front of our house. And we dreamed that we were always going to build something much bigger than this. And this is where we are today. These kind of anecdotes, these kind of stories behind you help create a human factor. That's important because sometimes I guess founders can be very disconnected from the human factor of what they're doing. They forget that the customer is a human with emotional needs and problems that want to be solved, not just customers or users for a piece of software. Next up is structuring your story. Like I said before, that strong beginning that comes in with a very strong, compelling reason to want to listen, and then a middle and an end. Now, there's a lot of public speaking techniques you can go into, which far better explain this than what I'm doing it now. But what it basically means is that you come in, your strong beginning can be a statistic, which presents the scale of the problem. It can be a quote given by someone famous who really explains that problem, or it could be a very strong, controversial fact that you deliver that really explains that the problem is that urgent. The middle is almost the justification of that. They're looking for uh, the case of customers who have not been able to solve this problem, the story of the competitive landscape where people have tried to fix this before and have failed or only done part of the job. And then the end would be, what the world looks like with your solution in place, how the world of that customer changes, how the world broadly changes if you're looking at something quite global as well. You want to have some visuals, you want to have some data, but you don't want to go too deep into that data. What the visuals and the data do is helps enhance the credibility. So you're looking at pie graphs, bar charts, things like that that are very easy to understand. They don't have complexity in them. So I might say, this is the growth pattern we've seen. This is the proportion of people who've said that they would be interested in this product, and have some credibility in it in saying this is a a survey that was conducted by Deloitte back in 2023, or it could be here's the results of a survey that we conducted just this year. And then finally, you've got the practice your delivery. So it looks like you know what you're doing. So if you practice that delivery, it shows that you have presented it in such a way that you're confident. That confident delivery will get through where quite often an unconfident but very competent delivery may not hit the spot. Confidence helps people to feel confident in you. When you're not confident in what you're saying, it looks like you don't believe in what you're saying, which tends to discredit things. Now, honestly, you get into a pitch meeting with investors, they're not that emotional. They're going to sit there and go, oh, you're a bit quiet. We don't really like you. But you don't want to create any kind of hurdle that people have to jump about. You want to be as accessible and as easy to understand, as easy to connect with as possible, because we're not just working with money here. We're working with a connection that we have with you. So the oxytocin needs to flow between us all, and that's through confidence, some kind of charisma. And if you have to, don't do the presentation yourself. Get the presentation done by someone who's very good at these things. Some of the best presentations I've seen have been by someone who was a consultant who did not own the company. They came in, used the owners of the company as the kicking over to them. So it's a question that only the owners can answer. The consultant will go, here you go, I'll just hand you over to Pete and Paul, and they'll be able to tell you more about that. So don't feel scared to use other people to come in and do that work for you, because we're all good at some things and not so great at others. So what do we do to build these pitch decks? The number one thing used these days is Canva. Canva is amazing. It's user-friendly. It's drag and drop. This very presentation I'm doing now is in Canva. And you've got a lot of templates and a lot of design elements, especially in pitch decks. There's probably hundreds, probably thousands of pitch deck templates in there. I'm going to show you a couple of those pitch decks that I've created as well towards the end of this presentation. PowerPoint is not as good, but it's getting better. It's okay. So it can do a lot of that work for you. You can get templates for it. The problem with PowerPoint is it's a bit clunky. Now, Canva does export to PowerPoint format. So if you have to use PowerPoint, you can design it in Canva to make it look good and then export it as a PowerPoint presentation. It maintains the fonts, it maintains the layouts, the graphics. It's actually quite easy. A thing you probably don't know is if you have done it in Microsoft PowerPoint and you want it to look better, you can also import your PowerPoint presentation into Canva. The opposite doesn't exist. So you can export a PowerPoint from Canva, but you can't import a Canva document into PowerPoint. So what I would probably do is, if you have to present on PowerPoint, build it in Canva, export it, then you've got something which looks great, feels great, flows great. Third one is Prezi. I'm not a massive fan of Prezi. It can be very, very, it can be very immersive, so that for instance, might go to what the dot in the word Prezi and the logo there, and inside that dot is the next slide, if you like. So it's like this three-dimensional, multi-dimensional, zoom in, zoom out. It can be quite beautifully done, but it's also, I find, a little bit distracting when people do this, because what you can see is it's this messy scribble of a pathway that you're going through, and it's not always, it's not linear. And that's where, it can really appeal to the creative mind, but it can be very confusing to people who are just used to having a slide deck with slide 1, slide 2, slide 3, etc. Some things to look at before you go for that final pitch would be, make sure that you're super clear. Get someone to sit in front of you who is not involved in your industry, and they will tell you whether there was bits that they didn't understand with it. Someone, that honest friend you've got, someone who would go, mate, I didn't know what the hell you were talking about. You want that person to get in front of you so they can assess whether you were clear. The second one is, you can assess whether they're engaged. If you see them sort of drifting off, pick up their phone and go, then you'll have a really good idea of knowing whether you are boring people to death, or whether the information in there is way too complex to understand, so they're just simply switching off. They'll also tell you whether there's visual appeal. Keep going over that deck to see that it actually is appealing to look at. Do not fall into the government trap, which is getting a PowerPoint presentation and basically every dot point on there is about 30 words long, and you've got a total of about 250 words on a page, and all you're doing is just reading the words off the page. That has no visual appeal, and you might as well not use it. Make sure your data is accurate. When we say go to your data room and find out all your different data, who's your market, who's your opportunity, where you're at, what have you got to, who are your users, Be accurate about it. Don't lie. That's basically don't lie is what we've got in there. We want to know the truth because once you hit the due diligence process of any of these investment opportunities, that stuff will be dug up because no one's going to invest in you just simply because you said it and you're a really, really nice guy. Not the way investment in Australia tends to work. There's lots of stories like Adam Newman and people who just invested in things like, if you ever watched The Social Network and you saw Sean Parker interacting with Mark Zuckerberg about how to invest in the original Facebook. That's not how the real world works these days. I think there's so many billions being lost to really bad investments that we're a lot more cautious these days. And the fiduciary environment of Australia is such that we are particularly risk averse when it's compared to other places. So if you're looking for investment in Australia, just make sure you got your T's crossed and your I's dotted, right? Have some confidence, have some body language, be someone who knows what they're doing. The best pitch I saw last year was from a group of people who have done this pitch so many times. It's almost like they've pulled out a cassette tape player and they've just pressed play and it just plays from where they last rewound it to. They know what they're talking about. They got muscle memory with it. They got a certain way of presenting it. And you've seen a pitch that's been done a million times, but that creates some level of confidence that they know what they're talking about. But what we want to do is make it simple, make it memorable, make it inviting to look at, and make it fun to read. Now, what I'm going to show you is a couple of pitches from people who we've been able to get funding for recently. This one is for a destination events booking app. So this was all about the ability of getting some kind of minor funding to be able to get that. So we go, here's the market we're looking at. $20.9 billion spent on business events. Here's the problem. It takes 80 hours to book each one of these. $12,000 are lost productivity per booking. Three-quarters of those bookings are lost due to long lead times. So we've got problems there that are very clear to understand. The solution then is clear, an online service that uses a database so you can get the estimates you need without having to wait, hours and hours and days to get that response back. Who are the people that's for? Well, the case study 1 and case study 2. Very simple. You see, there's not a huge amount of words on here. What's the market? Well, it's 2.6 billion people. Domestically, it's like probably a lot less than that who are traveling domestic. Sorry, a lot more doing domestic travel. Fewer of them doing international travel. But we do know that $1.4 billion of domestic day trips to attend business events, and these pieces of data were sourced from a place that could tell us that. So we went and did the research online and through archives of information and the Australian Bureau of Statistics to find this kind of information out so we can see what the market is. Here's the product. We say it is a desktop browsed product to be used by people in offices to book destination events or at least get some kind of some kind of estimate around that. So we've got future API access. We're showing that here's what it basically is. Here's the comprehensive database. We've got future editions, the roadmap there, and some different markets we want to hit after we conquer that first market. The progress, what we've got so far, we've got this many operators we've got an existing relationship with. We've got a bunch of them in WA. We've got some talks with Business Events NT, and investment-wise, we've given a pitch to this particular fund. So they know that we exist. We do know that we've got some progress, some traction. Even though the product hasn't even been built yet, we know we've got some traction. Here's the team of people that we'll be working with, and this is what we're covering. We can see there's a director, there's a business development lead, there's an experience development lead, someone who looks at what it looks like and feels like and leads it, and then there's a tech lead as well. So that makes sure you've got all those bases covered. And then we look at the competition, Corporate Traveller, Ivy, ICMI, Flight Centre. They do a little bit of the process, but they don't do the whole process. So we're saying, yeah, sure, these people exist, but they don't do all of it. They do some of it. And then financials, given a basic idea of where we think this thing could go based upon the cash in hand that you may already have, which might be about $50,000. We base that on a true spreadsheet we've done, which is a cash flow estimate. And we then put this into a very simple to read a couple of figures, which will show you the growth and where that growth may plateau. And finally, how we would use the funds that are coming through. So this is where the funds would go to 40% to this side, 60% to that side, and that's how we plan to spend the money. This particular slide Super important for the investors to be able to go, okay, what are you going to spend the money on? You're going to, oh, I'm going to buy a Lamborghini and a private jet. Well, that's not really what they want to hear. Unless you are a Lamborghini renting company and a private jet renting company, you probably don't need either of those things. And it'll be showing a lot of wastefulness. So we want to see, if we give you $1.5 million, where is it going to go? What are you going to do with it? So that gives you an idea, I suppose, of what the pitch deck looks like. I don't want to go into too much depth. I've got lots of other examples, but that's really, really a simple one for you. It really adequately explains what the problem is you're going for. It shows the market size, how many people this could impact, and the kind of money we're looking at. It shows a bit of an outline solution, but didn't go into a lot of detail. Notice it's just a desktop app that does this. And it's a simple solution to a problem that a number of people have got, and those people tend to be spending a lot of money. So not that many of them, but they do spend a lot of money. And finally, going through that process of what we're going to do with this and the money we're going to get from you, how we're going to spend it. Really important parts to look at. So hopefully that's given you a bit more insight into what the pitch deck needs to be. If you have any questions, please do feel free to approach us after this. My email address, dante.stjames@darwininnovationhub.com.au. Just look up Darwin Innovation Hub on the website. You'll see any sort of inquiry form there or phone number. Please do put those inquiries through to me. I've probably helped dozens of people do their pitch decks in the last year. So I'm more than happy to give some advice on that. If you've got an idea you want to talk about, I'd love to hear from it as well. Just get in touch with us, darwininnovationhub.com.au. For now, though, that's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll be talking about what VC term sheets look like, what they tend to have in them, and what you can start to prepare for as someone who's an early stage founder who's looking to get investment and to understand what the processes are and what things you need to prepare for. Thank you and have a fantastic day.